time for you to start getting some work done, pretty much was the message. So it was this very firm, very, very, very powerful. The energy was absolutely indescribable. I can't explain it. I've had that happen 2 more times since then, but that was the first time I really felt it like that. And then I was stunned, this presence sort of wafted away, and I was left with this interaction that had just occurred, and I was absolutely stunned. I felt like, I don't know, I felt that everything had changed for me just in that one combination of events, because it was the documentary and their presence and their communication with me afterwards that really did it. It was the combination of the two. And so then I was, overwhelmed by this and amazed, and I felt amazing. I felt wonderful. I felt happy. I felt inspired and energized and hopeful, and like my perspective had just been blown open, And so I spent the next 2 weeks just diving headfirst down the rabbit hole and was gobbling up every single thing I could find about the topic, trying to find information. And so a bit later than that, so 2.5 weeks after I had the awakening experience after watching the documentary, I ended up going into this warehouse I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and hundreds of us are hired every summer, or used to be before COVID, to go into this warehouse in Toronto and mark or score thousands and thousands of literacy booklets that are collected from children of a certain age all over the country. The schools give them out to them. So it's how the government tracks literacy. And so I went into this job, and it felt like a thud, compared to where I had just been for 2.5 weeks energetically, and with this new knowledge that the world is not what I thought it was, and reality is so different. I felt changed permanently overnight by that. And so for 3 days I was at this job just feeling like, okay, hang on a second, this is supposed to be reality. So this is reality in this warehouse, doing this job and making money and drinking coffee. Then what was that? And I started to feel concerned about myself. So I came home that night and asked for help from my heart, like just praying. Basically, I've never prayed in my life. I was not raised in religious family, but I prayed. I felt this need for validation. So the next morning, they gave me validation in the form of altering the booklets, the literacy booklets, right in front of me. So for the previous 3 days, the booklets had all had exactly the same kind of information coming from these kids. They were given a so creative writing. They're supposed to write 2 pages, and then the prompt was write about the baby. That was it. Just that one sentence. So then, they're 10 and 11 years old, they're in grade 5, grade 6, so they're writing. Oh, okay, so think about what you typically write.
Yeah, no, I totally know.
Well, I became famous because I made a video on YouTube and it went viral, or, I became famous because I did a collab with, I don't know, Taylor Swift or whatever it was, right? So they're writing about very typical child fantasy kind of stuff. This is how I became famous. But that day, the day after I had asked for help, so genuinely, I really was upset, and I needed to know for sure that this had really happened. The next day, for 45 minutes, from the beginning of the day until 9:45, every single booklet was completely different, and these were written in pencil, like in children's handwriting, but it became about the world is alive, like the world is alive and conscious. There are UFOs, there's time travel, there's a portal in my bedroom. These kids were writing this stuff. There's an intergalactic council, it was just bonkers. I couldn't believe it, and I was stunned all over again, and I realized that was the validation,
Emma.
So I ran to the bathroom, texted some friends, I was so excited, and came back, and for the rest of the day, they were back to normal. They were back to, a collab with Taylor Swift, or makeup this or that, the kind of stuff, or some very average childlike ways. It was extraordinary. So how do you explain that? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Did you obviously you can't keep these booklets, but that's so crazy that there'd be this island of exception among all of these tests with a prompt like that. Like, how does that, for any skeptic that would try and debunk that somehow, there's just no way that you could get that kind of information to come to you in the moment that you needed it. But especially, I mean, time is in question here because you requested that after I'm sure the booklets had already been collected and collated and everything else, and so you walk in, I mean, it just, again, shatters everything we think we know.
Really far out. You also just go to the front of the room and grab like a random stuff book that you're not even assigned. There's no way it could have been set up. It doesn't make sense. So that was extraordinary, and then I knew for sure that this was real, and then I started to really involve myself in the community after that.
You mentioned that you had watched Jeremy Corbell's documentary, and then you had this experience. Do you think that, in terms of interpretation or your how you ended up, sort of processing this, do you think the Corbell documentary helped to guide you toward sort of an extraterrestrial lens, whereas other people might have seen angels or something like that? Or how do you, sort of separate those things in your mind? You mentioned extraterrestrials. How are you sure they're planetary beings, biological like us, or sort of energy beings?
I love that question because I do think that our perception is incredibly important. Like we're in human bodies. We have limited perception. We have eyes that give us a certain amount of sight, right? And also we have mindset. And our mindset is so like the filter through which we gather, we take information and experiences. So thinking about perception and mindset, I do think that there's a reason why some people see angels, some people see extraterrestrials, some people see something else, ghosts, whatever it is. But ultimately, I think that this is really all about, regardless of what the bodies of these beings look like or what they appear to be, this is proof that there are other dimensions out there. Like there is more to what we're capable of experiencing, seeing, hearing, interacting with than we have known for a very long time. And also, it's not that shocking because if you look back at really ancient civilizations all over the world, the first indigenous people, let's say, who lived all over the earth, they had no way of knowing that each other existed, right? There were no boats, there were no trains, planes, and automobiles. So for all they knew, each one of these ancient civilizations, it was just them in the world, right? Yet they've all had similar myths, lore, stories, right? Encounters. Even the Bible has, as we know now, right, has paintings and depictions of these extraterrestrial beings or lights or UFOs or vehicles, right, that come to visit these holy people and give them messages. I mean, to me, it's not so crazy. And I think our indigenous people knew this stuff way back when they were in contact with whatever you want to call it, the ether, the paranormal, whatever it is that allows us to communicate with what's beyond this dimension, they were able to do that. So I think this is a normal human capability, and that the way that we have become incredibly disconnected from it, and that now we're at a point where there's something going on this planet where, duality is really colliding, and there's a lot of really awful stuff happening out there, but at the same time, I can't recall a time when on a mainstream level, people are talking about consciousness and evolution and, unusual experiences. So I think it's really up to each individual person to translate what they're experiencing and what's going on. But in my case, I feel that, all I can really do is follow what I'm being pointed to and directed towards. And it's more than extraterrestrials. I mean, I'm having a wide variety of different experiences and communication. I do not think there's an accident that I'm directed towards extraterrestrials, so, yeah.
Now, you also had a bunch of other, abilities awakened within you during this process, right? Like, you became a healer, I think, in some sense, and psychic abilities and whatnot. Was that a process of discovery, or did you wake up sort of soon after and, suddenly realize that you had these skills and could put them to use? I mean, how did that sort of develop over time?
I think that they came back to me because I remember, for example, when I was 17 or 16, actually, I had a group of high school friends, and they would come and hang out at my house a lot after school. And there's one girl named Nancy who was a close friend of mine, asked for a massage, and I had no idea how to do massage. I'd never done one before, but she was in a lot of pain from her neck. So I gave her a massage, and at the end of that, she turned around with this look on her face, and she said, "You are really, really good at that. Like, do you not know that you're really good at that?" And I said, "No." And so then it started happening where my other friends started asking me for a massage, and then word kind of went, got passed on word of mouth to other people who started inviting me to film sets to give massages to the camera operators who at that time were carrying these huge, enormous cameras to track movement of actors right through a scene. And it just sort of went from there. But I heard such amazing feedback. It just seemed to be something that I was just naturally able to do. And then I became aware of what was happening while I would do these massages, which was very interesting. The more I learned, as I started reading about these things, the more I learned that this actually does happen for people who do healing, where I would see the inside of the person's body. Like, I would just be able to see where they were having difficulty or pain, and I would just know to go there and then know what to do. And they were always shocked that I'd be able to do that. So it just seemed to happen quite naturally. But as a child, I also remember attending a kindergarten that was for children who were of mixed abilities, meaning some kids who had disabilities like myself, and then other kids who didn't have any disabilities, putting them in the same classroom and just allowing them to socialize with each other. And there was a girl who had brittle bone syndrome, and she was in a wheelchair. I remember her very clearly in my mind to this day. I can still see her. And apparently I made myself her guardian and her protector, and I was, wheeling her everywhere she wanted to go and making sure she was safe and protected. So it does seem like I kind of came into this lifetime with the affinity to be a healer, but these experiences that I've had have absolutely allowed me to reconnect with them, get to know them on a much deeper level, get back to them, and then also grow them and expand them. And part of that is because there's so much more actual information about these abilities now that's out there, that's accessible to us, that we can make use of to learn from and to study and practice. So that's been really helpful as well.
It's interesting to me. There's been a lot of discussion lately. I mean, starting with the telepathy tapes. I don't know if you're familiar with the podcast. I had Kai on the show, and so that was a privilege, and I really enjoyed our conversation. But there's been this thing about kids, especially kids generally, but kids with autism and kids with special needs in particular, and then also this idea that there has been. So, for instance, the Jake Barber was doing his interview on News Nation with Ross Coulthard recently, and he was saying that there is kids seem to naturally have less of a filter where these realities are and can sort of engage more naturally, and that we accrete a kind of barrier over time through socialization or whatever else, and that's one of the reasons why we have such a hard time, grokking and interacting with this stuff. But basically, the idea seemed to be that there are groups of people now that are recruiting or dealing with kids who may or may not have special abilities. There's also been the rumor that the GATE program in the United States used to do that. And as an educator, I'm wondering what you think about that. Like, in terms of, is it dangerous for kids to be isolated and developed if they have these kinds of abilities as kids, so as to hopefully preserve it and help it grow as they get older? Or is that something that we need to be thinking more and more about as we move into a future where this may actually be a more important part of, the reality we share?
Oh, great question. You asked terrific questions. Love these questions. So, I feel that it is very important for us to learn from these kids, but in terms of isolating them and studying them, no, I don't think that's a good idea. It's going to affect the child in a traumatic way, most likely. It also puts them completely at the mercy of the adults that are there running the experiments, and we don't know the intentions. You don't always know the intentions of those people. I don't think, I think there's some feelings, or there's a kind of narrative in the North American perspective about children being taken away and studied, being very, very nefarious. Like, this is always a nefarious thing, right? It makes me think of E.T., the movie E.T., when Elliot is taken away with ET and they're put into the tents and isolated. Or 11 in oh gosh, what is it?
Stranger Things. Yeah, totally, yeah.
So 11, right? There's just so many tropes like that, or there's such a dominant representation of children taken away and studied. I'm not sure that it would necessarily be like that. I think that it is helpful to learn from these kids, but I think that the way that Kai is doing it and Diane Powell, right, the original researcher, is very ethical, very kind and respectful to their students and their families, and also allowing parents to be part of what's going on. Right? Because the parents are really the kids' lifeline to the outside world to understand the child best. So I think there's new research that's being done differently, right, with a more compassionate lens, and also researchers are more able and willing to share what they learn now because there's more excitement about these topics and less stigma. So I think that's but I also feel that, there's a remarkably high number of babies being born with autism now, a really, really high number. And so that's really interesting. We can say, okay, well, it could be caused by environmental pollutions, toxins in our food, hormones in our food, whatever. Maybe, possibly, but there is something really different about them. And, I say that coming from the perspective of not just a person with a disability who's worked actively in the disability advocacy community and social justice community since I was a teenager, but also as an educator having taught only kids with special needs for my entire career, which is now 17 and a half years. I have worked with many, many, many children of varying ages and different kinds of exceptionalities, as we call them, disability. But the kids with autism are definitely different because they present as if, especially if they're severely autistic and they're nonverbal, they present as if they have no idea what's going on around them, when actually they know exactly what's going on around them. They're intelligent, they're in there. It's just the way that they communicate is so totally different, and their experience of their senses and the sensory world is so much more heightened. And I think that those two things, their communication style and their sensory abilities, are allowing them somehow to get to this other place where they can communicate with beings that are not there, they can read people's minds, they can predict things. I mean, it's definitely incredibly interesting, and I think because more and more of them are coming into the world, that in itself seems to be part of what I think is our natural evolution, natural human evolution toward perhaps speaking less in the way that we're used to speaking, and discovering that there's so many other ways of communicating with each other that are just as vital and important, and that maybe we can start using better. And so if we shut off talking, you have to listen. And listening is a skill that I think is really lacking these days in all of us, on many levels, because we're not taught that. So for me, I think that's part of the reason that I'm deaf in this lifetime, actually, was to learn to really have to listen, and listen on other levels. Because I can't rely on my ears. Right? My ears they're just not reliable and trustworthy for me. So I have to use my eyes, my body, my so many other senses, my intuition to listen. And I see that same kind of ability in kids with autism. It's a fascinating topic.
Yeah. A question just occurred to me. You were deaf until you had cochlear implants. Is that fair to say? Or
yes.
Was there a moment where you had like sort of the sound world opened up for you, or was it more, were you familiar with it already, or?
Oh, definitely. So I was diagnosed with hearing loss when I was 4, and so I got my first hearing aid when I was 4 years old. And 4 was a really pivotal age for me, actually. A number of things happened that I think started me on my trajectory of my spiritual side and my intuitive side. But in terms of this, hearing was a huge one for me too. And I remember coming out of the car, like stepping out of the back seat of the car after coming home from the hospital with my first hearing aid. And my mom came around the side of the car to get me, because I was only 4. And I remember seeing her being very big, very tall, standing in front of me, and looking up at her and saying, I can see the birds, or I can hear the birds. and a big smile on her face because I could hear the birds again when I hadn't been able to hear them before that. So
Yeah.
I was so delighted as a child to just hear the sound of the birds, you know, it made my whole day. That was huge, yeah. And then I got my second hearing aid when I was 12. And then because the type of hearing loss that I have is recessive genetics, so it means that over time my hearing loss is more and more profound. So basically, over time, hearing aids were just not doing it for me anymore. They weren't powerful enough. I became
Objectives
deaf,
completed.
and I needed to get cochlear implants. And so then I had another experience where I realized, oh my gosh, I can hear this again. And I hadn't even realized that I couldn't hear it anymore because it just faded away slowly.
Turns down the volume or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting that, I mean, there may be, I mean, I guess I'm asking, is there a comparison to be made between like losing and gaining that sense of hearing and then losing and gaining this sense of the other, you know? It seems like those are similar journeys, and I don't mean to speak for you, but it seems...
I totally agree. Yes, I think my hearing loss and my deafness has been a very, very big part of what has allowed me to connect in other ways. Yeah, for sure. So it's made me, you know, when you can't hear everything that's going on around you, you are sort of naturally put in the position of having to observe, right? And study other people to be able to catch what's going on. There's so many subtleties.
Destination locked
For
in.
example, sense of humor. Like I ruin people's jokes all the time because the subtlety of how they're saying it, I don't realize that they're making a joke. I think they're being serious and I will respond seriously. It's a hard thing to explain, but it still happens to me. And so, you know, it did put me naturally in the position of having to be an observer and watch the world around me, right? So that is at once isolating, but also becomes a skill or a strength.
Yeah,
right?
and an advantage, I bet, yeah.
Yeah, so both of those things, the isolation and the developing ability to observe really subtle things in human nature and in human communication that were behind or underneath words, right? Because I couldn't always hear words, so I would listen for what was behind them. I started realizing that I could actually sometimes read people's minds, and I could, you know, do certain things like that
Emma.
I dismissed because I thought, well, that can't be real. I must be making it up.
Emma.
But it still kept happening, and so it does seem that the more my hearing has gotten worse, the more my abilities have increased, which is definitely an interesting juxtaposition. And I spend a lot of time in silence. And whenever I do my spiritual work, I don't have my ears on.
It's interesting, you know, I mean, a lot of the ancient spiritual teachers talked about people need to stop talking. I mean, not necessarily total silence, but like the useless conversations that we fill our days with is so distracting and often so menial, you know, that we end up living in a space that's sort of cuts off anything transcendent because we're always focused on surface level realities. So, I mean, there's that to your point, and then also the fact that language is always so slippery. So, like, you never really, even though, like, we may, you know, have the same vocabulary, what your connotations are with a given word, or those sorts of things, we think that we're effectively communicating all the time, but we aren't. I mean, it's always really slippery. I mean, the postmodernists in, you know, literature studies talk about how, you know, you can't pin anything on language because it's always so, you know, hard to pin down. And I think that's true. And if we could find a way to connect on a deeper level and see sort of another, you know, find another window to what's true about each other, that would be a profound link for our society. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. What were you saying?
I don't even know. I was just blabbering. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that, you know, all this talk that we do, and especially these days, everyone's got one of these, right? Everyone has a phone, everyone has a platform, everyone has anything that they want all the time. And there's a lot of talking, but it really is a disadvantage, I think, in terms of us being connected, because it keeps us in our heads, right? It keeps us living from the shoulders up, and then we're not really in our bodies, and we're not allowing for all of the information and the the knowledge that our bodies have to communicate with us also. And that is a very big part of being able to connect with whatever it is that's out there reaching out to us right now, right? The phenomenon.
And I mean, I think it also reinforces our egos. We become way more egocentric, especially with things like social media, because it's all about what's your opinion on everything that happens, as if every person's opinion on everything that ever happens is important. It's really not, you know? We become obsessed with having, it's like if you don't have an opinion about something, somehow you're lesser than. And in reality, all that does is breed conflict, you know? And it's, that's why one of the things about this topic that I find so, you know, energizing is that it allows people who are opinionated about a lot of other things to kind of forget about all of that and focus on something that brings them together, and could potentially do that for the whole species, you know? And I love that. So, I mean, I wanted to ask you about your ontology, you know? I mean, that's a big word. I use it a lot, probably too much, but like, through all of this, what have you come to in your conception of what reality is? I mean, there's a lot of different systems and a lot of ideas about, like, you know, the universe is one, you know, and we're all kind of aspects of this, you know, universal mind or whatever. What are your thoughts about this world we live in and what it represents?
Oh boy, so many things. I wouldn't be able to fit them into this conversation.
Yeah,
but
sure. Yeah, of course.
I mean, I think about the state of the world and the state of being human beings, you know, pretty much all the time. Probably too much. You said to use ontology or ontological too much, but I really do think about I think about these things constantly, and I really should probably give myself a break every once in a while. But I think it's important to think about, especially now. You know, we're going through such an incredibly unprecedented, literally really unprecedented time, because we have never quite been in this position that we're in now, ever before. And there's a lot going on that I think is simultaneously beneficial if we choose to use it that way, or if we're able to use it that way, but also can be harmful, you know. So I feel like we're all at a crossroads where we have a lot of choice in terms of where we can go. So reality, I think, is largely made up of our choices and our decisions. And I don't mean just in this lifetime, I mean even previously to this lifetime. I think that we choose to come into certain lifetimes, we choose to have experiences and hopefully learn from them. I think that reality is constructed. I mean, even if you just think about energy, right, on a very basic scientific level, we know that everything is made up of energy. You know, every single thing. Like, I can pick up this bottle of moisturizer and it's made of a whole bunch of tiny little atoms that are vibrating at a frequency that I cannot conceive of, right? But if I had more ability, if I was Neo in the Matrix, I'd be able to just put my hand through this bottle of moisturizing cream, right? So I think that that is a possibility for all of us if we're able to empower the mind enough that we change our own energetic makeup. I think that that's like a big conversation, but ultimately I do think we have that option available to us, and that part of the point of being human is to strive to be that, right? To strive to evolve all the time. Reality is, it's funny, you know, we call it reality and it's really not real. I think of this one quote I read a really long time ago that I love, where someone said, okay, so there's 35 people who are all reading exactly the same book, right? 35 people, they're reading literally the same book. But for all those people, it's a different book. So really it becomes 35 different books.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we could say, no, that's not reality. Reality is it's just this one book and it's told this one story and that's it, right? But each person has a different experience, a different perception of that book, and also they've connected to memories they have, experiences they've had, things that they believe in. You know, it is a very sophisticated process, and so I think that that's what we're doing with reality. We're treating it like choose your own adventure, but we just don't know that we're doing it. And the whole point is to become aware that we're doing it. And if we're able to do that, then we can realize how much power we actually have and start trying to make that power come alive in us again. You know, I think that that is really the true nature of human beings, is this power that we don't know that we have. I don't think that this is a reality where we're going to be able to really fully come into that. I think that it's a reality that gives us a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities to learn really difficult things as well as wonderful things. And ultimately, I think that this is a plane of existence or a dimension that is entirely comprised of reality. Like every single thing, any person, animal, is realistic in this reality, I think. So again, we have choice, right? That signifies that we always have a crossroad at any moment to go towards this side of the yin yang or that side of the yin yang. And whatever we head towards, we typically make more of it. So I mean, this is a complicated conversation because I have my own individual reality, then there's group realities, right? Like a reality that a family creates together or that a neighborhood. And I think that there are these circles that just keep expanding and expanding that are each reality. But then it goes past the boundaries of what Earth is and it goes into the universe because that's also part of our reality. So there's so many different layers to talking about what reality is. Ultimately, I think that it is a construct. I think it's something that is here for our use and that we need to get better at figuring out how many abilities and freedoms we really actually need in a system that wants to be
It's and obviously related to the question of consciousness, and that's one of the things that I've tried to study about or think about myself, like nested consciousness or multiple consciousness. People talk about whether everything is made up of consciousness or whether the smallest bits, like atoms, have a level of consciousness and they sort of combine to form what we think of as a human consciousness, and then we sort of combine to form what might be considered a planetary consciousness, and on and on and on. That's one of the questions that I like to sort of fool around with, whereas there is no privileged level of awareness there. That we think that we're independent, free-moving, free-thinking beings, but together somehow we manifest maybe a kind of mind that works that level on the planet, but has also independence of action. And then you can sort of go beyond that all the way up to what might be a divine sort of mind. And if that's the case, I could see a place where we're here to evolve through the stage we're in until we help ourselves or our overall community move on to some other level. But those are all such beautiful questions, and it's, to my mind, it's like I was a strict materialist up until relatively recently, and living in that kind of a world is so much of a relief after thinking that we're all just random processes in a cold, dead universe that's eventually gonna, expire because of natural processes. It's like I think that one of the things that has to happen in order for this conversation to keep moving forward is that it's okay for people to have a purpose or see a purpose in their existence, and they don't have to see themselves as biological accidents. I don't know how we flip that script overall. Maybe the UAP conversation is something that'll ultimately help get us there. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Well, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, in terms of helping, do you see it as something we should be doing to convince other people of this, or is that the wrong approach? Because it does seem like such a beautiful way to be, but proselytizing is probably not a good idea,
Yeah, I'm definitely a person who, because I have studied listening, I know that there's really no point in trying to make somebody hear you. Either they can or they can't. And to not think of it as being right or wrong, but rather to think of it as, I have this perspective and this understanding right now. This person has a different perspective and understanding. Is it going to do anything to my life if they continue on being who they are? Probably not. We have to recognize that each person is at their own pace and their own level when it comes to all of this stuff, and also that evolution means different things, right? So it's a big question, but I think you know,
Impulse.
it is very important to spread this information. It is very important. And it is important, I think, for some people like yourself and myself to maybe come on camera and say it, right? So that it gets exposed to other people who want to hear these conversations.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, there are people who are seeking this information and there are people who are not. And so I think it's going to reach the people that it needs to, and it's not going to reach the people that are not supposed to hear it. I think it's just that simple, really. You know, I don't believe in going around on any front about anything, trying to convince everyone else that that's the right way or this is the answer or whatever. It never, ever, ever works. We have to let people be who they are and operate at the pace they're operating at and take responsibility for ourselves. Because there's so much need to make everybody else do what we want them to do, you know, and to make everyone else feel how we feel or see things the way we see things. You're going to be spending the rest of your life miserable if you do that. I really think that, you know, taking personal responsibility and becoming the most of what we want to become is the point, because then you automatically radiate that. If you're somebody who's into UFOs and extraterrestrials and what that means on a bigger level for humanity and for consciousness, you're going to integrate that understanding into who you are, and it's going to come out in your conversations and, you know, the way you are, the way you behave, the choices you make. Other people are going to see that, and that's a message. You don't have to go out and say to people, hey, listen, you know, this thing is true and you should believe it. Just be like a walking
Megamind.
example, and people will
Proxima
either get
Megamind.
it or they won't.
Proxmine.
Yeah.
A beacon, right? I mean, yeah, shine for other people to kind of see what it does for you, and maybe they'll want that same journey, and maybe not. I think that you know, that idea of we're in a moment where there's a lot of fear because of things that are happening in the world environmentally and politically and everything else. And like for myself, I find myself sometimes fearful of the future. Like if we don't address some of these calamities that are piling up, then the future may be very bleak, on the planet, and so that can be scary. But I think the wrong response is to act from that fear and go out and be like, all of you need to change. We all need to do this thing. Everyone needs to behave a prescribed way, and if we don't, then you know, certain doom. It's like that just spreads more fear, and it spreads sort of like a contagion. Whereas if we're more accepting of folks and listening to what they have to offer and allowing them to grow on their own, I think that that's a much sounder and safer and a better approach. And it's something I've had to sort of internalize politically in the U.S. because like there's a lot of people I disagree with politically, and some of them have ideas that I totally don't understand. But rather than be angry at each individual person who has a different idea than myself, it's like I feel like I need to start accepting who they are, hearing what they have to say, and then just trying to engage with them in kind of a loving way, you know?
Good for you, James, honestly. I mean, what other way is there to do it? Because wouldn't you want to be treated that way yourself if there was someone who saw you the same way that you're seeing them, right? Like, I don't understand
And
you.
they do see me that way.
That's
I mean,
right.
it's like we're always antagonistic that way,
Emma.
you know,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's happening, and I think, you know, this antagonism that people are talking about, of course, it's a big topic of conversation right now, how hard people are being on each other. Even if it's just YouTube comments,
Emma.
right, there's this sort of unpleasant side of coming out. And to me, I think that's just because the world has become so much more of an uncertain place. And when we human beings feel uncertain, we get scared. And when we get scared, we start lashing out, right? So this is all tying back to, I think, conscious evolution, because when you're someone who's focusing on consciousness and evolution and developing as a human being, you're then going to be thinking about how you feel. You're not just going to be feeling and reacting. You're going to be thinking about your feelings. And so, you know, you're less likely to just throw something out there, anger or betrayal of some kind, or a nasty thing. You're more likely to go, well, hang on a second. Is this the kind of human being I want to be? What are the effects of this action we take? You know, you're more likely to do that. So I'm really pushing for people to know themselves. And I think that's regardless of political inclination and skin color and culture. You know, everyone wants to feel the same thing. We want to feel joy. We want to feel at peace. We want to feel loved. We want to feel that we love ourselves and that we're okay with ourselves and we're not walking through life with shame and guilt. You know, I mean, being human is really damn hard. It is really we're pretty strong. I think we're stronger than we give ourselves credit for. So we need to maybe see more of that strength in each other rather than all of our flaws. You know, we're constantly pointing out where we're not doing wrong. But are we pointing out what we ourselves? It's really easy to point out where people, and if you don't examine it yourself, a popular phrase is shadow work. Right? Shadow work. I see it as just taking responsibility, like really being willing to delve into who you are. Because there's incredible depth in each one of us, and then that changes our relationships with everybody else around us, regardless of whether they vote this person or that person.
It's interesting. I'm in recovery. You know, I had addiction issues in the past, and one of the things that they teach you is that you have to clean your side of the street. That no matter what situation you find yourself in life, especially with other people, you are always bringing something to that relationship, and are at least, you know, equally responsible for the outcome of that interaction as any other person.
Yes.
So carrying around resentments is counterproductive, because if you really want to find the source of any conflict, it's going to be within you. And so you need to clean your side of the street, and once you can, you know, wipe your slate clean, then maybe you can look at other people, but you're never going to get your side totally clean, because that's the nature of, you know, frail human existence. We all have egos, flaws, or whatnot. And I think it's really important for folks to, you know, kind of think about now, just like you were saying. Talking about the evolution of consciousness, where do you see us evolving? Do you see a kind of a point where you think humanity seems to be trending metaphysically, or is that
Oh boy. Gosh, you know, James, I yo-yo up and down with my thoughts on that, you know, my answer to that question so often.
Objectives completed.
It feels a lot like we're surfing or something right now. You know, we're trying to ride these waves that just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. And so I am often spending time just trying to find my equilibrium in there, and, you know, to remind myself of the fact that I really do believe that human nature is inherently good. I really do think that. I think that most people who turn out to be really terrible people have probably been through really terrible things that made them like, and that does deserve compassion. Even if their actions don't, they do as a human being, right? So I try to keep my faith in the good nature of human beings, and honestly, I do experience that most of the time. You know, I really don't have a lot of negative interactions with people overall. I find that when you look someone in the eyes and you ask them how they are, or you give them a smile, or, you know, just these very simple but powerful moments of genuine warmth and humanity, human connection. I could be buying, you know, a hot chocolate at Tim Hortons and smile at that person, and it's that moment of connection that could change the dynamic. Whereas if I had come up and just said, hey, I want a hot chocolate, you know, the dynamic would have been very different. So I'm kind of going off on a little tangent with this, but I think what I'm trying to say is small moments are incredibly powerful, and we are all so worried about what's happening in the world all the time and where it's going and where we're going to end up, that we are spending a lot of time looking out there and thinking about really big solutions to big problems. But to me, I feel like what's happening in our everyday real life all the time around us, you know, when we go to get gas, when we go to get hot chocolate, when we're interacting with a colleague, those moments are also extremely powerful, because they're an opportunity every time to show our humanity. And if we were all doing that on that little scale every day, it would completely change the atmosphere, right? And it would change how we feel about where humanity is going. So I think that, again, focusing on the self and the actions and choices we're making in our own lives are really important, because it connects directly to our trajectory, you know, where we're heading. Everything we're doing right now, today, in this moment, is creating a future. So are there terrible things and terrible people out there? And, you know, are things looking really scary? Yeah, they are. Yes. But are there also really incredible people out there who are doing amazingly powerful, wonderful things? And there's a lot of reason to feel that the earth is going in a good direction? Yes. It's just that we don't hear that. We don't hear that in the news. We don't hear that on social media, because those platforms are run by fear, because that's what makes them money, right? So I don't know. I feel like a lot of it is about looking beyond what's coming at us through our phones and through our laptops, through screens, and really getting into, I guess, that faith and trust that we all used to have when we were kids about people and how people are really inherently good. Because I do think that we are. And I think we can still draw that out of ourselves and out of each other with small choices and decisions we make every day. You know, the big things like climate change, that's also true in this capacity. Like, what if we all stopped buying disposable cups all the time? You know, everybody just made that one choice. That would have a massive impact on the planet. Just that one thing. And you think, well, you know, that's not a big deal. I only get one disposable cup a day, or, you know, usually I'm really good and I use my thermal cup. But there's still so many people buying hot drinks all the time throughout the year and then throwing those in the garbage. If that one thing was changed, then it would have a massive positive effect on climate change. Plastics are a really big issue, right? In oceans, on land. I don't know. I feel like thinking ahead to what's going to happen on Earth, is it going to be this or is it going to be that, isn't necessarily helpful, at least for me, because the future is largely unpredictable. There's a million different possibilities of how the future could turn out. There really are a million different possibilities, and I have no control over at large what's going to happen to the Earth. All I can do is my part.
Yeah.
So that's how I think of it. I think of it as, you know, the drops of water that eventually become a lake or a pool or a pond. I have to do those really small things that are also powerful in order to make a bigger difference later. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely it does. I am struck by a book I had read a while ago, Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, I think his name was. The book struck me pretty hard when I read it. One of the things it talked about was there is love and fear, basically, in human society and in the universe more broadly, and that we have a choice between which one we want to engage in, but the one we engage in breeds more of the same. And so if we sit around dwelling in fear, no matter if it's like sort of trying to prognosticate what our planet's fate's going to be, or any of those things, that we tend to draw negative things to us, or we create more negative energy. But if we focus on what we have in common and what humans can do together, and hope for the future and hope for each other, then we can breed that energy, and you can manifestly change the outcomes by just focusing on how you put your thoughts behind one or the other. And
yeah, and I mean, looking at what actually occurs versus what we're told would occur, right? Like, people, there's one of the phrases that's really bothering me right now is "people suck, I hate people." A lot of people are saying this. I think that's really sad, because if you look at reality, quote unquote, I'm using that word very ironically right now, but if you look at what happened in Los Angeles, these horrific fires, and how neighbors came together to help each other. Like, everyone flooded in there. Firefighters from Mexico, firefighters from Canada came over to help the US. I mean, the neighbors and the people that lived in that vicinity drove around looking for lost pets, looking for elderly people who might need help. Everyone went to help. They didn't abandon the community. That is human nature. And I think that that's what happens every time we have a major disaster. People run towards it to help each other. They don't run away from it, right? And so all these people who are now saying, people suck, I hate people, I just want to go into the woods and never see another human being again. First of all, I get it. I totally get it, because things are very intense right now, and there's a lot of negativity online for sure. But let's be realistic here as well, and look at what's really happening all around us. You don't have to have that perception, but you're choosing to have that perception that people suck and people are awful, when right in front of you there was this very well publicized event that ended up creating a huge wave of compassion and love in that area, right, from so many people. So I don't know, I just feel like it's really important to not get swept up in rhetoric and not get swept up in the trends of what's being said. A lot of the time we think that we're getting swept up in it. We think we're being critical thinkers, right? Just keep balance and remember that there's duality everywhere. It's not all bad or all good. It's both.
Yeah. And I think that as we get closer to, I tend to agree with you, or that think that we're moving towards something, and I don't know what that is, but
Emma.
that polarity seems to be more activated. Like we get, more negative stuff, but we're also seeing more positive stuff. And what we choose to focus on and accentuate may end up playing all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
As an online citizen, you're going to get bombarded with the negative, so like put as much positivity as you can online. Good message.
Yeah, like be a little humble, like remind ourselves that we're really maybe not that developed as human beings. I think we've got a long way to go, and we should be patient and kind with ourselves, right? And then also, we can't expect the ETs or the aliens to come down and save us from Earth. I think that they're already here. They've been here for a long time. They know what's going on, and they have the option of making themselves useful anytime they want, which is happening more and more and more. And I think the message there is look up, like broaden your perspective, realize that this is more than what you think it is, and start acting like that. I really think that's the message overall.
Yeah, that's a good question, and something I also wanted to ask you about. Like, in terms of their mission, do you see it as sort of an effort by this other intelligence to get us to realize the nature of reality, or, I mean, again, quote unquote reality, because that seems like the result from a lot of contact experiences is to have this awakening where you suddenly realize that reality is diaphanous, and there's energies coming from all directions that we typically are blind to. And it sounds like you already answered that question, but yeah.
Well, I mean, I think different things. I think that, again, I'm not a black or white thinker about it, right? So my own experience with extraterrestrials and just all the crazy experiences I've had over the last several years, I feel like what it's taught me is that there are a lot of different extraterrestrials out there. Some of them are mean and some of them are nice. I'm using very rudimentary wording, but some of them are bad guys, some of them are good guys, and some of them are in the middle. And that it doesn't make sense to say, as a blanket statement, extraterrestrials are here to control us and take energy from our souls, and they're all evil, and we're not really living these lives. We're actually in tubes like they were in the Matrix. Or to say they're all wonderful and it's all love and light, and we're all the ascension is gonna happen, and we'll all look gorgeous. Like, neither of those things are real, right? I mean, 100% real. I think there's aspects of them that are going on, but I think that all I can do is speak from my own experience, which is that the people that I'm in touch with have given me nothing but incredible information, love, support, like none. I've never had this experience to this degree in my life. Like, this amount of just incredible love. It's a feeling I can't explain, and support and wisdom and knowledge and communication. For me, it's been really wonderful, and I know it's not like that for everybody, and I believe that too, right? I think it's all the things. So the ones that I'm in touch with and the ones that we hear about, I think most often in the ufology community, they do seem to be saying, okay guys, you're not treating each other properly. Your planet is so incredible and beautiful, and you're just taking from it whatever you need and not treating it with respect. If you continue to do this, you're going to be in trouble. That has been a consistent message for a very long time. And hello, look where we are, right? But there's also this aspect of truth, I think, to the other side, which is that we are living in a system of very manufactured thinking. Where we're being told what to think, how to be, what to buy, what to eat, what makes you happy, what makes you a successful human being. It looks like this, and you go to Instagram and you think that that's being a successful human being, right? So that is a system of manipulation and control that exists too. So both are going on, but I think that the ETs that are here to collaborate with us and help us realize who we really are, I mean, those are obviously the ones I want to pay attention to. So that's the choice I'm making, is to focus on that. And not ignore the other side of it, but not totally wrapped up in it either. Because how's that going to benefit me, right? It's just going to make me scared.
Yeah, exactly right. And fear has consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, last question, I guess. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. Very insightful and wise. But you mentioned that there, to your mind, there's a gamut of potential influences in the ET sphere, or however you want to define it. people talk about like CE5 or making contact, going out and like, you know, kind of emptying your mind, extending an intention of love and inviting contact. Would you suggest that, or would you say that there's some risk involved and maybe you shouldn't do that? How would you advise people who maybe haven't had contact yet to move forward in that regard?
I think go for it. I mean, really go for it, because we're all here in this. I think in this time, we're all here with the potential of being able to connect in whatever way we want. And if you want to call it God and Jesus, call it God and Jesus, if that's what it means to you. If you want to call it extraterrestrials and angels, call it that. I mean, to me, the words don't really matter. The labels don't really matter. It's the experience of receiving that communication and being reminded of the fact that we are so much more than a human body, you know. And so any opportunity that people have, other than, I mean, with some caution, for example, I would never advise anybody to use a Ouija board by themselves, or even with a group of their friends for fun. There's certain things you definitely should be careful with, right? But in terms of extraterrestrials and C5, what is the risk? I've never heard of any major risk happening to anyone, or anything terrible happening to anyone in the CE5. It's all about getting together in the spirit and energy of love, of collaboration, of wanting to have create an intergalactic community, an intergalactic relationship. I don't see anything wrong with that, because we already have it. We already have an intergalactic relationship. It's being hidden from us, and we're not aware of what's really going on. So we have the freedom to take initiative and go and try to experience ourselves. So I say go for it, and beautiful things have happened. You know, people have really remarkable experiences that open their eyes to reality not being the reality they think it is. And I'm always for that. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it seems to allow people to see life as a miracle again, which I think is important.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Sinead. This was a fantastic conversation. You're brilliant. You really are. So thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Honestly, I feel the same way. It was a wonderful conversation, and your questions are amazing. You're so professional and warm-hearted, and I really appreciate it.
Shield. Incoming. Incoming shield failed. Incoming.
This is Weaponized. Where the hell are we, Jeremy?
We are in a non-disclosed location because we got a party tonight. You and I are going to, I know you hate these, but we're going to do a Q&A for premiere of a 3-part series that if people haven't watched, they should watch. It's on Tubi. I got followed